Are you into video gaming? Do you want to play Minecraft or Valorant, but you can't because your PC is absolute? Well then throw that away, because we're buying you a new one. Now if you were to choose, would you build your own PC or would you buy a pre-built one? Personally, I would choose to build my own PC because I like working on them. I'll be honest though, the upfront cost for building your own computer can be more expensive as buying the individual parts adds expenses like shipping fees or marked up prices since some parts are in limited quantities. Graphics cards. That is not to say that it's not worth it to build one though, because it is cheaper to own in the long run. In general, the parts you would buy individually are of better quality than the bulk ordered parts using pre-built computers. This leads to an overall better build quality, which provides a longer lifespan for your computer. It saves you money because you wouldn't have to repair or replace the components as often as with a pre-built. Consequently, by knowing how to build a computer, it will be a lot easier to troubleshoot when a component fails, as you would be more familiar with the parts since you're the one who built it. You wouldn't have to pay to have tech support to fix it for you, since in this case, you are the tech support. Overall, if you don't mind spending more time and money in building a high quality computer with no compromises, go for it and build yourself a great gaming PC. So yeah, what about pre-built computers? I think a lot of offices use them, and I've heard that there are some gaming ones too. I mean, I think in terms of quality, I don't think they can really compare to custom built computers, but they can still game. So then yeah, why should we buy a pre-built over a custom gaming PC? Well actually, pre-built PCs aren't all that bad because in the end, they're still gaming computers that fulfill the task of being able to play games. And if you really wanted to, you could just pull up to your local Best Buy or Costco and get your fully built computer right then and there. You could literally start gaming on it the same day that you bought it. And if you decide to buy it from a site like Amazon or another website, you'll have to wait a little bit before you can get it. But in general, it's a shorter wait than having to wait for each part to arrive, since it comes in one package. What I'm trying to say here is that buying a pre-built can save you a lot of time, since you don't have to build it, because you know, it's a pre-built, it's in the name. You don't have to do anything on it once you get it, because it's plug and play. You don't even have to install Windows 10, because it comes along with it. And your computer might also come with some software, which can save you time and make your user experience a little bit easier. Despite that, it's recommended to reset your new computer after getting on it for the first time, since companies usually put some bloatware that can slow down your PC without you even realizing. Resetting it provides you with a fresh start on your computer, and it doesn't take that long to install everything you need, as I'll later show in the video. I've mentioned saving time when buying a pre-built, but it can also save you money if you know what you're looking for. Given the fact that they're mass-produced, companies buy their parts in bulk so they can often reduce the final price of their computers, sometimes reducing it so much that it's an obvious choice over a custom-built computer. Don't get scammed out of your money though, because some companies will put a bunch of RGB on a low-spec computer to make it look like a high-end one. Even if you're not the one building it, do your research and look at the parts such as the GPU, CPU, and RAM. See if they're good enough to be able to run the games that you want. It's gonna really suck if you buy a PC with a lot of RGB, thinking it's gonna be able to run everything that you want, when in reality, it starts overheating when you turn on Chrome. Please do your research and choose wisely. In the end, choosing which computer to buy is all up to you. If you really want to get the highest quality and most performance, go and order your parts already and build your own PC. If you don't have time for that and you just want to have a plug and play experience, go with a pre-built. Just go with what's most convenient for you. The previous segment of the video showed you guys which PCs to choose. Now, let's actually build one. Let's hope that you chose all your parts already, because we're going to put all of them together. In total, our PC build here is going to cost us around $950. It's not the newest, but it's still a mid-range gaming PC that can run most, if not all our games at 60 FPS in 1080p. The part that's going to cost you the most here is the graphics card, because getting a graphics card for MSRP is near impossible these days. It's only the graphics card though, because you can find all the other parts at normal or even cheaper prices than what I have listed here. Anyways, let's get on to building the computer. Okay, we'll start off by installing the CPU into the motherboard, which are basically the brains and skeleton of our computer. Let's just first take out our motherboard from its anti-static bag and place it on a flat surface that it can lay on, preferably the box that it came in.
Also make sure that you're working in a non-static environment because you can kill some parts just by shocking them. Okay, so you'll want to pull on the CPU socket lever and carefully lift the cover up so that we can place the CPU inside. Grab your CPU and line up the gold triangle that's on it with the one on your motherboard. After lining it up, very gently place down the CPU into the socket and carefully flip back down the socket cover and pull back the lever. You really don't have to put a lot of force when locking in the CPU. If you do, make sure that the CPU is properly seated inside. You really don't want any bent pins on your CPU or motherboard. Next, we have a RAM, which acts as the computer's memory, and for this build, we'll have 16 gigs of them. We'll put them into these long vertical slots located on the top right side of the motherboard, so make sure to line up the keying of the RAM sticks with the slot, because there's only one way to put inside. You'll then have to unlatch the slots and stick the sticks of the RAM inside until you hear a noticeable click. If there's 4 slots and you have 2 sticks of RAM, make sure to put them on the 2nd and 4th slot unless your motherboard manual tells you otherwise. This is to get the most performance out of your memory, using them in dual channel. Now it's time to install the CPU cooler. Your CPU should come with one stock, but you can always buy your own if you need more cooling. Some coolers come with thermal paste pre-applied, but for this tutorial, we'll have to put some ourselves. Using this syringe of grey goo, we're going to squeeze out a very tiny ball on top of our CPU. This grey ball shouldn't be larger than a green pea. We're now going to screw our cooler into place, so locate the 4 corners around the CPU and line up the standoffs with the screws. Then, with a little bit of force pushing down the cooler, screw down each of the 4 screws in an X pattern so that the pressure put upon the CPU by the cooler is equally distributed. With the cooler locked in place, we can now put our CPU fan that'll provide the cooler with air. The fan should just click into place without the use of any screws, but your CPU cooler may be different. After putting on the fan, you should plug in the 4-pin connector on the 4 pins located on the motherboard called CPU fan. This is what's going to power the fan and make it function. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at the case, which will house all of our parts. We're going to take the entire motherboard and put it inside the case, but before that, let's install the I/O shield. It will be a real hassle to install the I/O shield after installing the motherboard, so let's just do it now. Make sure to put all of the motherboard standoffs in the right places so that we can properly secure it. We're using an ATX board, so all the standoff locations should be marked with an A. Just place down the motherboard inside the case so that all of the holes inside the motherboard are aligned with the motherboard standoff. Your case should have provided you with the screws to screw in your motherboard, so now it's just a matter of screwing in all the holes. graphics card is what's going to allow us to play our game smoothly, and the one we have here today is called the RX 590, made by AMD. It's important to remove the slot covers before installing the card, so let's do that first. The amount you need to remove may vary, but ours only needs the normal 2 slots. We're now going to install the graphics card, so place it inside the PCIe slot, which is a long horizontal slot with the HDMI ports facing towards the back of the case. If done properly, it should lock into place easily. The graphics card should have filled up the 2 slots that you took out, so just secure it by putting back the 2 screws that were removed with the slots. Powering all of this is our 650 watt power supply made by Corsair. It should be more than enough to provide our system with power. The power supply is going to be placed at the bottom rear of the case, with the fan facing downwards to receive more airflow. As with all other parts, we're also going to screw it in place. Your computer storage is what will store your operating system and all of the files that you'll use with your computer. Using an SSD is better in general, as it speeds up your computer and just makes your user experience just that much better. And for the placement of your storage, if it's a SATA drive, just find space in your case, usually the back or a drive bay, and screw it in. If it's an M.2 drive, then it should be screwed into your motherboard. Check your motherboard manual if you need to. Now we'll be putting all the power supply cables into the case, starting with the one that powers the motherboard, the 24 pin. This is easy to find and is usually the biggest cable. Take the cable and route it towards the 24 pin connector on the motherboard. After doing so, take the cable and plug it in. Next, we have the CPU 8-pin cable, marked CPU, which will power the CPU. This cable is going to be routed to the top right of the case, where the 8-pin connection is located. This one's pretty hard to get to though, since it's jammed near the fans and the CPU cooler. The cables powering our graphics card are called the PCI cables, marked with the name PCIe. It pretty much looks like the CPU 8-pin, so be careful. And your card may need 1 or 2 of the cables depending on how much power your GPU needs. For ours, we need both of the 8-pin cables. Route them towards your GPU and plug them into the graphics card. After routing, plug the cables in until you hear a noticeable click. The SATA power cables are thin and have an L shape to it. They are what power our hard drives and SSDs, so make sure to plug them in. The SATA data cables are also thin and are a smaller version of the SATA power cable, and they connect themselves to the motherboard. They're the cables that send the data from the SSDs to the rest of the system. As usual, route the cables to the motherboard. When plugging in the SATA cables into the motherboard, make sure the boot drive, in this case the SSD, is plugged into the connection that says 0 on the motherboard. Any other drives can be placed on the other connections. This is to make sure that the motherboard chooses to start the boot process from SATA 0, which always gets chosen first. Let's also make sure that our case fans are plugged in so that there would be air flowing into the case. To plug it in, choose any of the headers that say sys_fan and simply plug it in. I chose sysfan1, and it was quite a hassle to plug it in since, like the CPU 8-pin, the header was in a tight spot in the corner of the case. To be able to use our case's headphone jack, we'll need to plug in the cable that says HT audio on it. There should be a corresponding header on the motherboard that'll be called audio, and that's where you'll plug it in. Remember, the cable's keyed, so there's only one way to put it in. For the final cable, you have the one that says front panel, which will let us turn on the computer. There should be a header called front panel or something similar, and that's where you plug it in. In some cases, they'll provide you with a bunch of small cables to plug in. If you're not sure which goes where, it's best to refer to your motherboard's manual, as there might be variations to which cable goes where. In our case, it's just a single cable connection. You're basically done building a computer. All that's left is to close up the computer case, which means closing up the rear panel and glass panel. Also, don't forget to plug in the power supply cable to an outlet and turn it on. Plug in your peripherals, and there you have it. You've built yourself a gaming rig. Congratulations. Before you turn on your computer, make sure you have a Windows 10 key plugged into the computer so that it recognizes to boot from it. From there, it's pretty simple. Just go with the Windows 10 installation process and skip the part where it tells you to insert the product key, because you don't need one to run Windows. Choose which Windows 10 version that you want, but I would recommend Windows 10 Pro. Just make sure to choose your SSD, if you have one, to be your boot drive, so that Windows can load a lot faster. It's pretty self-explanatory from there, and you should be well on your way for a proper Windows experience. After installing Windows, I would suggest downloading your drivers for your graphics card by going on Google and searching your GPU model space drivers, and maybe also the software for your peripherals. I would also install Steam or Epic Games so that you can play games if you plan on doing so. And with that, we're done. You have a full-fledged gaming PC, and now you just have to sit back because it's benchmarking time.
Boy, what the hell, boy?
Let's regroup here.
Sandwich. What? No, I said, of course you're getting more kills than I am.
Of course you have more kills than I am.
That's not what I said.
It just doesn't sound right.
That's not
Of course
what
you
I
have more
said.
kills than I am. Of course you have more kills than I am. Lol.
That's not
That's
what I said.
literally what he said. That's exactly.
No.
That's word for clip it.
That's not what I